right. Well, guys, thanks for joining me. This is Alexa, how can you make me money? I wanted to give this presentation to kind of share some of the experiences I've been having with Alexa development, and it's a pretty interesting and unique environment, and I learned a lot of things. I thought I'd share it with anyone here. Now, quick question. Who here has done Alexa stuff before? So you guys have made some skills, understand that stuff. Okay, cool. But most of you obviously haven't. So I take it the rest of you guys really anybody here know about it very much? Like anyone have an Alexa device in their house? You guys, of course. And okay, anyone else? Okay. Okay. Sure, sure. Okay, so cool. All right. Well, so this is basically of course, the Amazon Echo Show series and the Echo Dots and all that. So a little bit about me. My name is Caleb Garner. I'm a producer, designer, and audio guy for Part 12 Studios. Been doing this for a while. Um, you can check out at Part 12 Studios Twitter. You got my email address there if anyone wants to write me afterwards or reach out anytime. And my website's part12studios.com. So actually started doing this whole thing, like game development in general, in 2008. Went full time then. Started in Nashville. Was there till about 2011. I moved to Boston. So I'm now been up there ever since. I actually did go to Siege here in 2010 with some friends. We drove down and shared a room, and it was pretty cool. So I really was excited about having something in the Southeast that isn't GDC, that's like across the country and stuff. So you guys are really lucky to have this event. It's really cool. So Alexa, what is it good for? So to give a quick understanding of what Alexa is all about and stuff, essentially is, it is essentially a cloud-based assistant. It's these devices that the Echo Show and the Dot and all these things. They don't really have any apps, anything on them. They're just basically interfaces that talk to the cloud, Amazon and such, to get information back and forth. So it's just an interface where your phones, as you know, you install apps that are stored locally, your phone gets destroyed, the information is lost, and that kind of thing. So it's all cloud-based, and the actual devices themselves are virtually, they're dumb. They're just basically interfaces, like your mouse or your keyboard would be. So they're able to do a wide range of tasks, making lists, reminders, setting clocks and timers. They can interact with devices, household devices, and so forth, streaming audio, and then Amazon's really putting a lot behind this. So it's a really kind of a disruptive, I guess, platform that changes things in a certain way, just the way mobile did, and touch screens and such did, when they came about. So, it's an interesting platform. So it's loaded on a lot of different devices, a lot of hardware, and it's on a lot of things. It's not just the devices you see, and oops, sorry. Get back. So Alexa hardware, let's talk a little bit about the hardware itself. So Amazon has had a lot of products featuring the Alexa. It's basically, I think last time I checked, I was looking, there's about 20 some different pieces, like devices that are essentially Alexa devices. And, of course, most people are familiar with the Dots and the Echoes and such, but they do have several other forms. They most recently made one that does like selfies. I guess it's for people who are really obsessed with fashion and stuff. They want to look at pictures of themselves, and it just takes selfies and even, I guess, can make recommendations and stuff. So it's an interesting way of, again, it services a certain audience. And Amazon has a growing number of gadgets for it as well. These are not necessarily Echo or Alexa devices, but as much as they're things that work with it, like light bulbs. There's even Christmas lights now they have that and they connect over Bluetooth, and you literally can control the Christmas lights from Alexa. So it's pretty interesting. And then, like I said, like light bulbs, you set the color, the light, the tone, and it's all sort of, it'll just listen, even security systems and such. And third-party companies, as I was saying, are also starting to get more into that. You've got microwaves. Basically, Amazon has like this chip, this card that you can get, and you can essentially interface it with whatever your appliance is or device, and this effectively gives you the hooks you'd need to be able to, say, have Alexa pair up with it via Bluetooth and then send commands. I think the one that Amazon started with as sort of test product was a microwave. That basically it's a very inexpensive microwave. It's a very small one. It's very much like a college dorm type one. You wouldn't want it for a house, but basically it will actually listen. You can set the timer. You can tell it to start, and you can do things like that. Cook a potato, and it already has the right settings and does it like that. So it's pretty interesting. So Alexa development it's very interesting. It's definitely different than if anyone who here comes from, say, I don't know, maybe mobile development or just application development in general. Okay, so you understand the way you have code, you do build, you have a runtime, you have an executable and such. Well, the anatomy of a skill, and by skill, a skill is an app. It's what Alexa calls an app. So Alexa skills are Alexa apps. So that's when I'll use that term. So you have the way it's essentially structured is you have your invocation, which is the thing, like Alexa, open this thing, right? And that's the command that Alexa's listening for. So it's Alexa's the cue that says, okay, wake up, I'm talking to you. And then essentially, uh, then she knows to open a particular skill in general. And then you have utterances and intents, and these are the things you tell her to do. These are the things like play this thing or do that or whatever, and then she has to interpret that, so parse whatever words come in, and then essentially come back to you and then just try to understand what you've told them, whether it's something I understand or I don't understand, and then you have your response, of course, which is either the new information that you need, that she has for you, or maybe a prompt like, I didn't get that, could you say that again? There's all those kind of, it's whatever she gives you back as feedback. Now, the skill development environment, now that's the part that really gets interesting too, is, so it's built on Amazon Web Services, so it's basically, you really do have to be in that environment if you're going to develop skills. You can't just go and do some sort of like open source third-party thing and then just make skills on your side. It's got to go through AWS. The really cool thing, this was kind of a neat thing too, is Lambda functions, which I know you guys are shaking your heads, you know what I'm talking about. They're really interesting. So this is kind of a paradigm shift, I think, with programming in general. And I'm not necessarily a developer, so I'm speaking more of just from working closely with developers. But as you know, if you're traditionally making, like, say you're in Unity or something, right? You have your scripts, you have your files, and then you build your app, you compile it, and you got this executable that you then put somewhere and you run it, right? But since this is completely cloud-based, what these Lambda functions are essentially are snippets of code, like those files, those scripts that you might have, those JS files or whatever you have, but they're out there on the web, or they're floating in the cloud, I must say, and when you run your executable, they just sort of run and grab those snippets of code as needed in real time. There is no compiling, there is no executable. So it's almost the way browsers work. Like HTML is kind of like that in a way, right? It sort of interprets it in real time. What you see is just a series of scripts it executes. But it's more so because it actually does deal with logic, as opposed to, your web page isn't thinking much. It's just saying, oh, put this here, put this there, and show this. That's all it's doing. But obviously Lambda gets more into that. Like, you're actually dealing with variables, loops, and things like that. So it just gets a little bit more interesting. So it is pretty cool. And then JavaScript, from my understanding, is sort of the most popular language with it, but you can use things like Python, and there's other ways of getting other languages as I understand it. But I think, generally speaking, JavaScript is sort of the preferred method. Of course, maybe it's just my developer's opinion. But all right, so a little bit more about some skills, noteworthy skills that are, I think, worth sharing about. Some fun ones. These are just good starters, I think, that you want to play some games. If you've never played an Alexa skill before, like a game, and you want to try some out, because there's some that are just like, well, that was kind of dumb. But this is a would you rather is fun. So I don't know if I've got kids, and I got like a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old, and my older one likes the would you rather videos. Like, would you rather fall off your bike or fall off a ladder? And you just have to kind of make a choice, right? Like, it's one thing or the other thing. Would you rather, whatever. All these what if scenarios. So this one basically does that, where it simply says, it gives you, like, first of all, ask you how many players do you want, and then once you have those players, you then are asked each at a time, like, what would you rather, this or that? And when you give your answer, she'll respond back saying, oh, good choice, 68% agree with you. Or if you pick, oh, that's, well, it's good to be different or something like that. Have a different result saying, well, only 35% thought the same thing as you did on that one. So it's fun because especially if you're doing multiplayer, because then you're next to someone else, you're sort of like, oh, well, you'd rather do that, like what? And so it's pretty cool. So, but then also a really fun one too that I liked a lot is called Yes Sire, and this one's really cool. So basically, you're essentially like a duke or whatever, that you have a king who's put you in charge of a certain part of his kingdom, and you are, as being in charge of that area, you are presented a series of scenarios, like, it is your birthday and you are offered the opportunity to have a party, or that kind of thing. You say whether you want to have the party or you don't want to have the party. And if you have the party, you might you might go up in like one element, like say influence or something like that, but then you lose some money for that because you spent the money on the party. But then other scenarios, I mean, the peasants might not necessarily appreciate that, and they think less of you for it. But on the other hand, if you make these different choices, then the balancing act of it is, if you get too popular, the king can see you as a risk and have you executed. If you are, say, run out of money, then the king would run you out of the position because you're a fool. So ultimately, you have to just sort of skate in this fine line of choices. And it's well written, it's good dialogue, and it's engaging. It's so simple, but it's fun. So, and Jeopardy is another great one if you haven't played that one. So Jeopardy is basically a 6-round series of questions of Jeopardy, and you simply are, of course, asked questions, and and you answer them in the form of a question, or you're given statements and all that. And it's really well done. But you just get like a 6-question session, and then you're done, and that's it for each day. You come back. And this one has also some. These both have these second two actually have some really good monetization structures in there too. So some skill facts. So there are 20 million Alexa devices out there, as last I've heard. So there's a lot of devices out there you could potentially reach, and that's really a nice thing to consider. It's not like you're just making it for some niche, small audience. Um, there are over 45,000 skills so far, but relatively speaking, compared to the App Store, that seems like nothing, right? I mean, where they're in the million, they broke a million a long time ago. So it's still young, it's growing, and a lot of these skills, not to be intimidated by them, but a lot of them are very simplistic skills that might just be like facts and random things. It's very, very simplistic stuff, and and so it's a lot of there's a lot of shovelware, I'd have to say, in there. Um, so an interesting fact also that I was doing some research. So only I think it's 18% of all Alexa users don't use any skills at all, which is actually pretty good, because that means most are using at least one skill. The other thing that's interesting is that over half only have 1 to 3 skills on them. So clearly, a lot of the users are not necessarily installing skill after skill after skill. They're not going crazy. They're sort of using maybe a couple that they like, and they go about they might use Alexa for basically the regular things that don't require any unique skills. So while that might, depending on how you look at it, the way I see that, that's actually really encouraging, because that means that there's a lot of room for your skill, or a skill that anyone creates, to be that fourth or fifth one, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, that could be that other one that people might find useful. So, and it also means that people do understand how to enable a skill. So now moving on to some challenges, though. This is the thing too, that you'll find that it's good to understand. Discoverability is a challenge, because even with mobile and web and stuff, you have a screen that can list lots of apps. You can be on the App Store, and if someone, say, types in role-playing game or something like that, there's a chance that yours could be listed amongst many others to at least get an opportunity to be seen. But with a device that has no real screen to count on, you pretty much have to know to go look for it and enable it. So, Amazon knows this is an issue. They have they're making attempts at doing things. For example, if you play a skill, to say, well, you tried this skill, maybe you'd like this one. They'll make suggestions, for example. So you can basically find that there's ways of getting sort of cross promotion and such. And also, there's clever marketing things like too. Like, you could even help cross promote your own skills within your own skill, right? Like, you have multiple ones. Why not encourage others to try your others as well? So discoverability is one thing. Enabling skills. This is a really big pain in the rear. So basically, and I don't know what happened. Back in 2017, there was some article saying that Alexa was going to let you enable skills from the device moving forward, and that's clearly not the case in 2018. So the idea is that if you want to, most skills, well, let's put it this way. Some skills like Jeopardy, for example, and I think even Yes Sire, these are popular. I don't know what the criteria is actually for Amazon to not require it, but some skills will just open by you asking it to be open. You don't have to do anything extra. However, a majority, probably the 44,000 other ones, right, basically require the skill to be enabled. And to do this, you would have to go to Amazon.com, search the skill name, find it, go into it, and then click the enable button, right, from a browser. Or if you have the Alexa skill or the Alexa app on your phone, your Android or iOS device, then you can also do it that way and enable it and find it. Totally uncool, though. I mean, to talk about just hoop after hoop after hoop to jump into, and you're going to get drop off. So it's terrible, and it needs to be fixed. But I know they're doing everything they can. Maybe it might be a patent thing or something that we don't know about. But languages. But another challenge can be languages and localization. Just to realize that, of course, it does support German. I know it supports. There's 5 versions of English at this point. I believe there might be more languages coming or out now. I know as of like in the fall, there was only German and English, and UK English. There were only 3, but more recently I've been developing apps, and I've seen a lot more languages open up. So I don't know to what extent they're at right now, but they're obviously trying to do more. But they're probably not going to be supporting like Zulu, soon. But then they might have other more common languages. They'll sort of expand out over time. So. So Alexa and games. Let's move on to some of the kind of like what we're all really here for. So there's many possibilities. I've broken it into kind of 3 sections. I kind of think generally cover most of the types of games there are, but there's still a lot of cool ideas that could be explored. So this is by no means, authoritative and final. But there are single-player games, and these are typically more one-on-one things, like an adventure game. Like, you choose your own adventure. You're basically being told a story and being asked to give an answer. And you could play it with somebody, but ultimately someone has to make a choice. All right, and so it's really a single-player experience. Mind games, the same thing. You're being asked to say, like a memory game. You're asked to remember certain things and recall them. So again, basically something that a single player would play, not really something that's co-op. Although maybe it could be. And there's ways of doing things. So local experiences is another thing. These are more like active games. You could do things like, the Alexa might ask you to do something, and then you have to physically do something. And of course, it's all the honor system. It's all about how engaged you want to be in the experience. But also physical games, like think about board games. And this is actually something I've been thinking about too. Is like, imagine a board game that actually works with Alexa, right? I know there's a big resurgence of these sort of tabletop, indie scene and such. And I think that it would be very interesting to use Alexa as sort of a companion skill to your board game that actually has pieces and everything. So, I mean, like a dungeon master would be a great example. So another in party games, of course, right? Like group people, like you can have all kinds of games that could require actual group participation. And then multiplayer online, of course. Now this is like asynchronous, could be things like you play a chess game with somebody. So you pair off with somebody, you're playing this game. There's a session that exists. You play with them. That maybe they have 8 hours to do their move before you do your move, and so on and so forth. Or there's also live games. So there's actually a rock paper scissors game that somebody made, and you can actually do multiplayer. So basically, you say, yeah, I'll play rock paper scissors multiplayer, and it just pairs me up with some person over the internet. I mean, it could be lying to me for all I know, right? But ultimately, I trust that that's what it's actually finding another player to give me rock paper scissors, and then we play and we do around and so on. So multiplayer is certainly a viable option as well with the right concepts. So some limitations to be aware of though too, as you're kind of thinking, wow, this is so cool. I can say anything I want. I can do anything I want. It's just voice. It's me talking a conversation. There's a few things about the way the world of the sort of voice apps are right now, and I think that I'm sure it will get closer to like the next generation computer. But for now, this is where we're at right now. So a few things is you need to keep your utterances simple. Basically, multiple choice and minimal word phrases. One of the things that's kind of I've been running into trouble with a lot of that skills I find difficult is if you want to challenge somebody to give you a very like one skill I was working on is a woodchuck riddle. So basically, I would ask a person how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood, and then they have to respond with the answer. Now, if a person said a woodchuck would chuck some of the chucks of the wood, if they got most of the words right, it would give it a pass. And I'm like, no, I need them to get every single word correct. And because they're trying to make it a more conversational system, it seems to be that it doesn't quite work really strictly. Also, I think in just general, you just want to make sure that players don't have to say a lot of words, because the more words they say, the more you ask of them, the more factors you need to think about too, right? Like, what if they said this? What if they say that? So it's important to help keep people kind of in line, but there's always that fine line of balancing between interactivity and making it feel like a person can just say whatever they want and not feel like they're in some sort of like, following a path. So another thing to keep in mind is that it can't really record complex text. Another skill was working on was like sort of like a notes thing. Like imagine being able to, I could like to do dictation or something like that. It seemed like, oh, that'd be great, just have her say some notes and she can record them and maybe like a card or something. But it doesn't seem to be some difficulties with that as well. So it's just precise comparisons and such. Single channel audio. Now, as a guy who does music and sound effects and stuff, I obviously was really excited about the idea of, man, the audio possibilities would be incredible, right? Like I'll have Alexa talking and I'll play music in the background and just be all this cool stuff, sound effects firing off. But it turns out it's pretty simplistic at this point. You essentially have either the sound being produced by Alexa, one of those voices, or like an MP3 that's played. So you can't like layer music. Now I know that it irks me too, because I know that you can do ducking with streaming. Like there's certain situations, like I think with Pandora and certain other skills, there are ways where the audio will duck down and Alexa might say something and you can hear the music still playing behind it. But it's like a very, very specific and seems to be at this point limited thing that they have. So again, when you're thinking about what kind of sound and things you want to do, it's going to have to be kind of like that idea. It's either text or it's audio. So some design tips. Basically, what you got to look at is, again, keeping your concise responses. And this is essentially that when you tell a person what you want them to do or give them information, it's basically the one breath test. If you say what you want them to say out loud for Alexa, you want it to be her, say it yourself out loud. And if you have to take a breath to do it, you probably need to cut back on how much you're saying. And it just helps keep things, again, concise. Because the thing about it too is, if you really talk for too long with too much information, it's going to be in one ear and out the other. You cannot expect your users to remember 6 different points of information in a single statement. They're just not going to remember it. And maybe some will, but then even the people who are really devoted and maybe willing to really listen closely and be focused, someone knocks on the door in the middle of it and just breaks their concentration. They're like, ah, crap. So it's just a lot of room for frustration. Less can be more. And again, games like Yes Sire and the Wayne Investigation are both really well done games that are simply a few simple choices. It's not about trying to give them some sort of infinite options and possibilities. It's just try to give them some good options to think about. The Wayne Investigation is pretty cool. It's actually you're investigating the murder scene of Bruce Wayne's parents, and essentially, so you're in Gotham City, and it's all done with like voice actors, and it's a good production there. And then of course, as I was saying before, Yes Sire is a great example of something that's very simple but still very much a game. So another thing to do is learn from established audio, like audio only mediums like radio, the radio dramas. If you ever listen to the old Monty Python records, not TV stuff, they actually did records of just audio, and listen to how sound designers would use audio in their environments and how you could maybe take some of that to what you're trying to produce. So number two. And also, you notice that I know we're talking about how to make money with Alexa, but the reason why I'm kind of focusing on a lot of the design points here is because basically, unless you can really make a skill that stands out, it's going to be very difficult for it to monetize. So just like it is with mobile, you can't just throw an app out there and expect it to make money. It's got to be something that really has to shine about it. And so I wanted to make sure to cover a lot of these important points for you guys to factor in as you build a skill and want to try to eventually monetize it. So there are a lot of they've actually added a lot of cool voices now. There's like a German guy, there's a kid, there's a boy and a girl, and so you've got a lot of different Alexa voices now. So when you want to tell a story, it's no longer just having to listen to Alexa constantly talk. You can now change characters. Your entire skill could be not Alexa if you wanted it to be, and so that's a cool thing to look at. So another thing to consider is text versus recorded audio. So you could totally not use the text system. You could make completely just MP3s as sound effects and everything you want. And there's a trade-off. The pros and cons to both. Text is great because, of course, you don't have to hire somebody or spend time recording and editing and compressing your audio and getting all that stuff done, which is extremely time-consuming. But text obviously is only going to be the text, and you have to spend time even sometimes refining some of the words. Like when I would have Alexa say, "How much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood?" The way she actually would the pacing of the words were not perfect out of the box, and I actually had to spend time going in there and trying to adjust slightly to make sure that the pacing feels good and sounds right. So so again, just there are pros and cons to both, and it really just depends on how much content you need. Sometimes if it's something that's very simple, you might be able to get away with some sound effects and audio, but if you're doing like lots of content, you may find that there's just unless you've got a serious budget or a lot of time on your hands, it would be just too much. And then when it comes to oh my god, I had to redo my game Zscape, which is one of the ones I did. And the audio I did when I first launched it was basically all. It was all recorded audio. I did all the voice acting. I added sound effects. Just did the whole thing. No Alexa at all. And it was like a series of 16 rooms. And you're basically moving through these rooms. And there's zombies in some, and there's others that don't have zombies. And you have bullets. So if you have enough bullets to get through all the rooms, but man, the first batch I did, I was kind of like, I did different sessions with different mics and different room environments, and you could just sort of tell that the acoustics were slightly different. And I was like, no, man, this is not good. I got to do better. So I went back and revamped all 16 rooms and all the audio, and man, that was like a week it seemed easy. Like, I'll just go and replace the ones. I mean, I already had them established. I know what I'm doing. I'm just going down a checklist. But man, just the different variations and file and saving and compressing, and it just was like really tedious. So that's where you just want to think about that as you get into it. So SSML is a really cool thing too that is for text stuff. Basically, it lets you do things like whispering, as I was saying before. You can also control speed and pitch, emphasis, and things like that. So it lets you have Alexa be a lot more expressive. There's actually a really cool skill, and I wish I could remember what it was called, but I get these emails every so often that basically give you a bunch of different things that you can try with Alexa this week, right? And it's all topical, current. Like there was like was that Jack Ryan or whatever. The new movie was coming out, and they made a skill game for that, which is really cool. It was pretty cool. It's well done, and it just tells you like, hey, try this. And so one of them though was like it was like a comic book or something. And basically Alexa was like reading she was reading from a comic book, and it was really cool how she was like, and then and she was using these different expressions and emphasis, and it just sounded really good. It was like much more vibrant than you're used to the just typical, more very straightforward voice.
You mentioned the different voices and characters for Amazon Alexa. Does that also transfer over into different languages as well? Like if I chose like a German, do they have different characters in there, or
No, not at this time. I think they're pretty much, it's like English. Those are all English voices. I mean, there is a German voice, and I think, and then maybe they do have them. I'm not. I haven't. I can't even get to it because it's in Germany,
Yeah.
right? So I am speaking out of ignorance here. I don't know for sure. They may have already included that. It's very possible that they actually do have as many of those voices available in the German language. But yeah, it would have to be something that to research. You know, we did do a game. We did some stuff for Amazon back in the fall for the Echo buttons that came out. They needed some launch titles, so we worked with their team directly to produce 3 games for that, so they'd have some titles to go with the hardware when it came out. And we had to support German at that time. And yeah, one of the challenges for us is we literally had to just trust it because we had to do localization. We had our spreadsheets and we had the different languages to kind of like, this is the German phrase, this is the English phrase, and so forth. But developing with that was challenging because you really couldn't just, because then you have to think about like duration and stuff too, right? It's not just a one-to-one because German has its own, like a sentence that is short for us could be longer in German, right? And things and so on and so forth.
Of
Yeah.
course, that turned up is tied to your account. Because when I was working for my company a year ago, based in the U.S., I moved to Ireland, so I got Alexa cooker account in Ireland.
Okay.
And it started off with the UK accent, but as soon as I installed my account, it moved to the American accent.
Interesting.
So
So you
if
can
you want
change
to
it.
make a German account, you might be able to hear it.
Interesting. Okay, that's cool. Very good. So yeah.
Now, those voices, can you switch them? I mean, or do you have to stick with one, or can you have them talking
Yeah, you could. You could. I mean,
different
I'm. I never actually tried literally having them change words in mid sentence, like having you say hello. My name is Mud or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like but
one character could ask a question, one, I mean, you could have
absolutely,
a little,
you could have conversational things like and then the German guy comes in and says something. Right.
yeah,
Absolutely. It's just like they're just basically blocks of text, and you just basically just it's assign who you want to say that versus that, and I think they'll have names and such. So. There's an Italian guy, and they're good. The voices are pretty well done. So yeah, so the SSML is a nice thing as well. So a few more things here. So okay, something else to factor in is that there are devices that have screens, and then many that don't. But don't forget that there are screen devices, and while it is extra work for your skill, I think you'll find that it's for one thing, it's fairly simplistic. What can go on the screen is not like full like it's not like crazy. It's not a game. You can't like put things in Pac-Man and have things moving around. It's pretty much just display a graphic. Like put this PNG here. You have a background graphic and you have like a little icon. So it's pretty minimal stuff. But the point is that you can update that in real time. So imagine you're doing like a dungeon crawler and you wanted to have like my game Zscape. If I had the resources to have maybe each room has its own graphic background. As you go from room to room, I could actually update the Echo Show to change that graphic for each room, which would just make it more immersive. And maybe it won't obviously matter to the people who have Echo Dots, but for the players who maybe have the show would get more enjoyment out of that. And it's not that much extra work if I had the art resources to do something like that. So while you just don't forget them, but don't rely on them either, because you don't want to make a game that would require a screen, right? Like, well, let's look on the screen and you can see what's going on. Like, no, I can't. I got a dot. Um, so just keep it in mind when you're thinking about what you're wanting to make. So again, the thing to keep in mind too is written style is not equal to spoken style. If you were wanting to say bring a book to Alexa, right? You will find that if you're trying to do like a game, it's not as necessarily always going to come across as concisely, because when we listen to words, it's not quite the same as when we're reading. When you read, you have the discipline of looking at other words. You can always just jump right back to the last word, and just we don't talk like we write. And so just think about that too, that when you want to do anything, speak it out loud. Even if it is from text, maybe you need to adjust it, maybe you need to shorten it, or anything like that. Just give it at least a consideration. And it may work. You may find that the text didn't really require any massaging or anything like that, but just make sure you think about it before you assume that it's just going to be the best way to convey what you want to say. And so something else to consider too would be like mixed media. Like you can imagine like playing a game that actually does require a board or something like that, and you put the pieces, and you can like playing Battleship. Imagine like playing Battleship with Alexa. It's the same idea. You could put literally a board just for your own sanity. I mean, technically you don't have to have one because it's all being kept track of. But if you want to play Battleship, you want to have the pieces here, and then have her be able to do that. So, and you say C4, and she could do D3, and you can that kind of thing. So, there's all kinds of ways of introducing props basically into a game that you might be able to find unique ways of making something that's kind of cool. So another thing that's pretty interesting too that you have sort of an arsenal of tools is also things called speech cons, and these are essentially specific words and phrases that Amazon spent some time on with Alexa and basically massaged and polished them up a bit so that they sound good. So, for example, abracadabra. She will say abracadabra, but you don't want to type in abracadabra. You actually call on this sort of speech con that will then fire off that particular phrase. And there's lots of them. I think she'll say like oy vey and bah humbug and things like that, right? So there's a bunch of different phrases that you've got access to. And then another thing to keep in mind too, and when you're asking, we come back to prompt for things, response variety is really great because, people don't want to hear the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. So when you're like, what would you like to do? Like, and I say this knowingly, like Zscape, I just have a single, what would you like to do? Because in that particular game, I was working with a developer, and that's all we had time to do. But if I went back and did it again, I would probably record myself saying, what would you like to do? What's next? Tell me what's going on. What's up? Whatever. And make these variety. And then every time the player comes back, I could actually set up to randomly call on any one of those phrases just to help break up some of the monotony of the experience. So keep that in mind. And again, and when it comes to like doing text, it's fine because really you don't have to worry about, you can just it's just the same. Just basically just type up a series of different phrases and let Alexa speak them. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. And then unlockable content, I think when you're making a game, and we'll talk more about that in terms of monetized stuff later, but really even free stuff, I think players will appreciate the fact that as they play your game, that they're investing time into that and that you're recognizing that, like leveling up, right? Like, hey, congratulations, this is you've been playing, there's so many questions, you've unlocked this new thing. And you're not charging them for it, you're just basically giving them credit for that and just saying, hey, we recognize that you're playing this game, and then you just sort of feed them a little bit more and let them know there's more and it lets them know, hey, there's actually more to come back to. It's not just like, I pretty much been there, done that, there's nothing really fresh to expect from this skill, I don't have no reason to come back. So another thing to keep in mind too is mobile inspiration. So I did a lot of mobile games before getting into the Alexa stuff, and I'm still working that space at times. But there's a lot of interesting ideas that you could take from like a high-level concept of what mobile games have done, and even other games as well have done to create a sense of to return. Layers of engagement essentially. Like it's like Farmville, right? You plant the seeds, and in 8 hours you come back to harvest the seeds, right? Or to get the plants. Well, you can do the same kind of ideas with this too. The thing of how do you give a player information, let them know that there's something going on, and make sure you give them reasons to come back, and just explore ways of expanding new concepts and new content. Also, mini games and stuff, right? Like a raffle, you can say, hey, and by the way, before you go, try this thing real fast or something. So there's a lot of interesting ideas of what people have done, like games like Candy Crush, right? Like you play that game, and the simplicity of the game itself, you have all of these other things that they throw and pop up at you, like, hey, you got this timer. If you can beat this challenge, or you have a challenge to beat this other guy at playing the game in the next 2 hours. So just think about that kind of stuff. There's no reason why those things couldn't necessarily carry over to an Alexa skill. So keep it simple above all. Essentially, what you're looking at is, people aren't going to remember a lot of stuff at any given moment, and you need to just accept that. It's just like user interfaces. Like, if you've ever played a game, or you've ever made a game for somebody, and you want to let them try it, and then they don't get it, and you're like, why don't you get it? It doesn't make sense, and it's just that people won't necessarily always make the logical conclusion that you do as the designer or the developer. So just be sure you get feedback from players and let them try it out. Have your friends and family give it a shot. Don't say anything, that kind of stuff. But basically, yeah, just try to keep. It really is this. It's not about cramming World of Warcraft into the Alexa. It's just they're different kinds of games. These are simplistic games. They're never going to be on that level because there's just too much information to try to manage and realistically. And then you will play. There's actually Skyrim did a game that's essentially a kind of MMO RPG experience. It's still pretty minimalistic, but even that one, I frankly found it a little bit confusing about what my options were, because I was like, am I shouting something? What's a shout? There were some things about it I felt were a little, not too obvious, and so I would definitely say that was a good example, though, of a decent game, and they did a good job with it. But just even think about any other game you play, as you play them, what things did you like or not like about those games, and what can you take away from that either you want to bring in, or make sure that you don't put that in your next skill. Leaderboards are another interesting thing to do as well. So leaderboards, because it's important for some games, more than others. It's like to build like a community. The idea of having it where basically you have people who actually play this game and engage in this game, and you know that you're not alone, that you're not the only person playing this game. And leaderboards are a really cool way of doing that in a very passive way. When I know that I ranked 13th out of this, I mean, well, it means that at least 13 other people have, 12 other people have played this game, right? It just gives me a sense that I'm not the only person putting my energy and my enjoyment into this particular game, which I think helps kind of create a sense of coming back. Like the rock paper scissors game I was telling you about before. It's kind of interesting to think that when I play this game, are there enough other users actively sort of coming in and out of this game to actually play a game of rock paper scissors with me? So all right, and then so money. All right, here last. So some monetization options that are available with it right now. The first one is the subscription model. This is, as you can imagine, you sign up you agree to pay a couple dollars a month essentially to be a premium user, and as you can imagine, that's pretty much the way that would work. Consumables, like the classic mobile thing, you buy coins, 100 coins, you spend those coins, and they're consumables, right? Or items, like you get a magic potion, you use the magic potion, it's gone, it's not renewable, it's just consumed. And then unlockable content, like chapters and so forth, that kind of thing, where you are able to purchase and get new content. And then to go a little more into each of them, subscriptions. So consider ways of limiting daily access. Now, it's a little counterintuitive, I felt like, when I was playing Jeopardy, for example, which is, again, a very popular skill, and I don't have any numbers to know, like, how much money are they generating and such, but I do know it's certainly a popular one. And what they do, each day, you're given a 6-question round to play Jeopardy. And that's it. Come back tomorrow, then play again. That's what Alex Trebek says to you. And then that's like, wow, that's kind of like, I can't play more? That's weird. So then, but they offer an opportunity to subscribe, and by becoming a subscriber, you get to play 2 games a day. I'm like, really? Okay, right, exactly. That's basically a daily double. So, but that's it. But it's a popular brand. It's a good, and they did a good job with it, and that works for them. Clearly, that's what the market bears, and they felt that that's good. So it's a lesson to learn. It might go against your thoughts. Well, if I make him a premium user, I guess that means I need to give them like Netflix. I just need to give them everything, right? Like right up front. So maybe not. So there might be ways of finding a balance of strategy, like maybe like pacing things a little bit more so your content can go further. Because especially most of us here are probably very small developers. We don't have necessarily huge resources, so we don't want to give them everything we have in day one to consume. And be like, oh crap, I'm out of questions in my quiz or something. So consider that as a way of limiting daily access. Also, as you say, limiting daily access for free users, but then less limitation for paid users. Now, another thing to look for ways to offer additional access to content and features. So again, you can imagine as a free user, you give them basically the sort of basic access to what your game can do, but then by becoming a subscriber, they become sort of a VIP member, which gives them access to perhaps other game. Maybe you have like mini games that become available that give a player an opportunity to make more XP that day that wouldn't be available to a free user. There's a lot of ways of looking at how you can sort of limit the content as a free user, but then open up these opportunities for a paid user. And again, back to the Netflix approach, giving them unlimited access to content, but a little bit more about the, I think that covers that well enough. So consumables, so a little bit more of that. So again, coins to purchase items and such, or bottle, like then you might find a potion on one of your quests and such that becomes an item that you can utilize later. So it's good practice to give them samples too. So just like anything, you want to give them an opportunity to understand what the consumables like to have in the first place. If you only say, you can have these things if you give us money or whatever, is not going to probably result in a sale. They need to know what it's like to have it and therefore feel the loss and the absence of that nice thing. So just like any good drug dealer, right? So, all right. So another thing too is keep prices in the store simple. Remember, everyone's having to keep these numbers in their head. No one wants to feel stupid because you're like, well, I thought I had enough coins to buy that sword, but that's right. It was 178, not 175. Something like that. So if you keep the numbers in the economy smaller, make it like 10 points, 15 points. Keep the numbers simple to manage in your head. So for a player to be able to keep track of that stuff, and make it easy for them to check their balance too. Like Alexa, what's my balance, and things like that. You can ask them what you're at. So another section, unlockable content. So again, chapters are a great example, right? You can make so much of your game, and then you basically stop it at being a good hook, and you can offer the next chapter for them to purchase if they want to proceed. Another thing too is, of course, these are restorable, permanent purchases. It's not, because this is all cloud-based. It's not like, if you remember Temple Run back in the day, right? If you played Temple Run and you earned a bunch of stuff and you bought things and stuff on your phone, but your phone got lost, or you uninstalled the app and reinstalled it, everything was lost, right? So people know that this is, and you don't have to restore it because it's all cloud. It just knows you have the stuff. There'll never be a problem of having to bother with having to restore it. And the other one too is like unlockable content. I think is always the coin doubler rule. Like I'm a fan of Punch Quest, and that's like the only thing I ever paid for was the coin doubler thing, because I was like, I love this game. I know I'm going to play this for a long time, so I know that every time I play this game, that $3 or $4 purchase I made, I'm getting more for my money because every coin I get twice as many. So so this is just that's one thought of how you could do an unlockable thing as well, some sort of a bonus that modifies your account. So other ways, other branding opportunities. So you think about in other ways of making revenue. This isn't so much you generating currency from the app itself or the skill, but think of it as ways of like, okay, you produce a product that deals with a certain subject matter that you maybe know a company that would want to be sort of associated with that. If you were doing a drinking game or a soda game or something like that, why not reach out to Coca-Cola and say, hey, I could do this soda game and just have make a Coca-Cola soda game. So there's opportunities to find markets like that. Also, actual businesses that may want something made in the first place. Of course, that's a way to make money is to make it for somebody else, right? And from the get-go, and they hire you to develop that. And that's kind of like what we did when Amazon hired us to help them with their games. So in advertising, same thing. Now there really isn't an ad mob per se, right? Something like some sort of a turnkey ad distribution program that would basically just plug in an audio clip at this point. I'm sure it's something that's coming, but basically, but you could still find ways of maybe doing like, if you again had the connections or something, like you knew someone who could do it, you could do things like either cross promoting other skills you've made, which of course helps just keep people in your own ecosphere kind of thing, but also if you could find other companies like, this game brought to you by Coca-Cola, that kind of thing, same thing. You could get these little taglines. It's not like you're putting a 30-second commercial like they'll do on like YouTube or something. It's just like, but a little snippet of audio wouldn't be too disruptive, but certainly would give an opportunity to do a little ding on your skill. So I'm sure that's got to be coming in the future. I'd love to be part of that because I think that's going to be a big moneymaker at some point when people realize that they can just sort of drop these little tiny advertisements into their skills along the way and monetize accordingly. So in conclusion, essentially the possibilities with Alexa are they're pretty exciting. It's different. It's, if depending on what kind of games excite you and stuff, you may just look at the Alexa platform and say, how could I take the things I like to do and maybe would they work with Alexa? And it doesn't mean everyone's going to enjoy making skills, but at least it's worth, I think it's worth exploring. Again, the market is still pretty young and vibrant. And I meant to mention this before earlier too. Monetization, there is the one thing that happens, and this doesn't happen. I don't know how often, but basically, Amazon, if you make a skill that people really like and use, Amazon will just pay you money for making the skill. Basically, you can't bank on it. Don't ever expect that. But if you happen to make something that catches on and people really do find value in it, and Amazon sees that this is a skill that's becoming basically a staple in their world of skills, they're going to support you basically, and then be willing to pay you some money for a period of time. And it could be thousands of dollars. It just depends on how much. I don't have exact numbers, but it's not trivial. Some companies are basically building themselves off that. So, again, good design and writing is going to be really key to success. You just have to be able to convey what you want to tell the player as effectively as possible, but also as entertainingly as possible to keep them just put the little smile on their face and keep them going. So. That's pretty much it. So, you guys have any questions?
So you said that most users have one to three apps.
Mm-hmm.
Skills. Do you know what the turnover rate for skills is? Like what their lifespan is approximately?
No, I think that's pretty much like every skill basically has its own analytics. You'll see that when you put a skill out there, you can see how many people have engaged with you. It's nothing too complicated. It's pretty straightforward stuff, but you can at least get a sense of who's how many people are using your skill from like day to day, week to week, and so forth. So, but no, I don't know what I think that's a great question, but I don't know it. Oh, yeah, he was asking basically like what's the turnover? Like what's the long tail of a given skill once it's created and it's out there? Does it get widely adopted and does it keep getting used over a period of time? And I think it just varies from skill to skill. But I'm sure there are plenty of skills that are basically like this, right? Just like any mobile app, you try it out, you kick the tires, you love it or you don't, and you move on with your life, or it becomes something you visit frequently. Sorry. Yes. What's that? Yeah, well, it just depends. Yeah, well, it depends on like how much you can get them to pay you, basically, right? It's pretty much standard development rates is like whatever you would normally offer. But as far as like I would do a skill for a smaller company, for like I've actually done a couple for free for some friends because based on like I'm like, building up like a portfolio. Like I have a buddy of mine who's a DJ. So I was like, look, I'll make you an internet radio. He already had a internet radio station, so I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll make you a skill that puts your DJ thing out there for him and stuff. So it really is a matter of just like how much value. I've been wanting to actually talk to restaurants, like local restaurants, and say, hey, and just look, I don't know how much I can charge them. I really don't. The question is basically, does it make sense to them? Is $500 to them ridiculous? Is $200 asking the sky? Is $5,000 okay? It really is a matter of just what you can, how much value you can give that customer to make it worth it to them. And so yeah, so it just varies. But basically, you figure whatever your considerable hourly rate is going to be, and you figure how many hours it's going to take you to make it, and that's just kind of bill them accordingly.
Can you get Alexa to interact with a web page or a mobile phone, or is the only interface that you have from this?
I mean, you can access APIs and web content. There's certainly any data that's out there can be pulled from in terms of talking to stuff. Um, yeah, I mean, we have actually. It's not easy. I know, at least it wasn't when we were looking into it at the time. But one of the things we were looking at for our game Zscape is we thought it'd be fun to actually have like an interface where you could actually click a button, to test it. And also when we were doing the Echo button stuff, one of the things we were looking at too is it said, wouldn't it be great if we actually had like a web page that would simulate the Echo button itself, right, and be interactive and clicking and stuff. But it can it be done? Yes, but is it easy? I think it's trickier than you might think. Which is the thing that's been interesting about the skills stuff. You think some things are very simple. Like we were working with the Echo buttons, and we were working with Amazon as they were developing the SDK still as it was coming out, and they were dealing with legitimate challenges just getting the buttons to work as needed, right? And then we're trying to build a game on that stuff, which isn't even working. Like, oh yeah, it'll work. It'll work. It's not, but it will. And then Christmas is coming up. Oh, yeah, it'll work. So we got across the line, but it was definitely challenging. So yeah, there's definitely it's a new technology. A lot changes to also be. It's kind of like if you ever did any development with Facebook. I'm not sure what it's like these days as much, but boy, earlier on with Facebook, the guys were just changing their SDKs like left and right, and their API calls, and screw it, you guys will figure it out. So if you had your thing break suddenly, you're like, oh, you got to go figure out what they changed and then fix it and stuff. So it's kind of like that too. We're one of the skills we did recently was getting rejected. I'm like, why is it getting rejected? I didn't do anything different. I just was resubmitting it for. I made one like content change, and it was suddenly getting rejected. And it's because they had just changed some sort of criteria in the review process. So yeah, but it's cool. Yeah,
So it's I kind of two questions here.
sure.
One is kind of a hardware and development question. The other one is a monetization model question. The hardware question is, are you able to also use the physical buttons on the device while you're inside of a skill? So so use those trying to kind of interact with it in a secondary way, and like a
Are you on like the Echo buttons?
yeah, like the Echo button, or like I know Tomato Dot has button read next, like activate.
Yeah, that button isn't really used for anything in a skill that I've ever seen. I honestly haven't even tried it, frankly. Maybe it is possible, truly, but I don't think that because typically speaking, you're never going to be right next to the dot anyway. It's really like you usually back away from it, sitting somewhere, and you're calling across the room or down the hall. So it would also be that's the other thing about it. You would never expect someone to be there, so you probably would never even want to do that, or at least I mean, if you can make it optional, I suppose, it would be a big deal.
Yeah, I was just kind of
Sure, yeah. And the Echo buttons are also they're interesting as far as the way they work too, because there's certain things that the way you respond. Because again, remember the button is not smart. It doesn't have any knowledge in it. It just responds to it's getting button presses, and when those buttons are pressed, then it fires off a line of code, to the server. That's basically it. So and it won't do anything until it gets back. So the idea of like say clicking the button like this, going tick 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 and cycling like say really fast, you know, it has to. There's latency,
yeah.
right? So you really couldn't design we did a game. The first game I ever did was World's Fastest Drummer. It was a flash game, right? And it's a speed drumming game, right? So it's like, so you really couldn't play a game like that reliably because I mean, you could count the number of buttons being pressed potentially and then fire those off, but it just isn't quite as real time as when you play a controller and you've got a D-pad. Those hardware buttons are hardwired to do things, so you're still you're a little bit detached from the cloud.
And my second question about the monetization was, so this is a new, pretty much like kind of an emerging market and stuff. In your experience, if you can kind of talk about, what do you think is kind of like the price point for this market? Is it a thing of like mobile where free and then maybe kind of like the most people end up paying on like maybe $3 or $8, or
Right.
is this something more like where more of the people who have these devices, you think that they're more willing to be like, oh, this is like a $5 experience
Mm-hmm.
or $5
Yeah, I mean, what I do, it's very, I think from the pricing I've seen in other skills and stuff, it's very similar to mobile pricing. Basically, the dollar, $2, $3 price range. You're not going to see $5, $10 things. That said, but again, if you, I think, depending on the content you're generating, and it's like how niche it is. If it's really specialized, and it's like you know, the fans of a certain story or something that really support that thing, maybe they're willing to pay a little bit more just because they love the product that much. But I think generally speaking, you're going to basically look at like mobile pricing of just a couple dollars for this and that and stuff. And yeah, it's and at this point there is no Angry Birds stories of how this skill has made $12 million in 3 days or something like that. So it is an early market, and I don't necessarily see this as I just don't know what it's going to bear in terms of time. But I think that as it matures and it gets there, it's like AR or in VR and stuff, right? It's like you have all these people that are getting into VR. Are they making any money off VR? No. I mean, people are investing in it though, and Amazon is investing in it. So you kind of see it like that. It's like you know, I mean, people are making with VR, but you know what I'm saying. As far as like the large majority of them, there's still not the big install base to really support all the indie developers and to keep them all going and making the kind of money that would be sustainable. So I think Amazon, the Alexa stuff is in a similar boat where it's early, but it's like those people who can find those spaces, right? Like it's kind of like a wild frontier. If you can get out there and find the skill that is a good fit for what you know how to do, what you like doing, and you have a good idea, and it catches on, there's potential. Which is like any good app, on mobile. Like no one said Flappy. Like the guy just like when he published Flappy Bird, like I'm gonna make all this money when I submit this. It was basically just being involved. So I see it as a matter of be engaged, be involved with the platform. If you enjoy it, if you like working this platform, there could be potential. So I definitely believe it has the potential. I don't. It's not going away. It's not gonna be a fad. It's so I think it's knowing how to do it and understand it is always a good thing. Sure. Anyone else? All right. Oh, how are we doing on time? Oh yeah, we got 5 minutes still. But anyway, awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys, for checking this out. And again, I've got my email just if you ever want to reach out to me. I'll be here for the rest of the event as well. So I'll see you guys around. Thanks.